President-elect Franklin D. Roosevelt hadn't even been sworn in yet when someone tried to take his life. But Roosevelt's composure and compassion showed the American people the type of leadership they could expect during the hardships of the Great Depression. I'm Bob Summers, and this is a presidential story. After winning the 1932 presidential election, President-elect Franklin D. Roosevelt took a vacation to prepare for the monumental task of leading the U.S. out of the Great Depression. Roosevelt stopped in Jacksonville, Florida, for a rally before beginning his 12-day Caribbean cruise aboard the Normal Hull. The private yacht Normal Hull eventually became the USS Normal Hull when the Navy commissioned it during World War II. The ship was owned by Roosevelt's millionaire friend Vincent Astor, heir to the Astor fortune after his father John Jacob Astor IV perished in the sinking of the Titanic. After the cruise, on February 15, 1933, 17 days before FDR's inauguration, the Normal Hull docked at the Miami City Marina. Roosevelt had a brief window in Miami before catching a train back to his home in New York. Local Democratic Party officials convinced Roosevelt that on his way to the train, he should take a moment to address well-wishers at Bayfront Park. Only 45 minutes were allowed for the drive from the pier to the park, Roosevelt's speech, and the rest of the trip to the train station. When the Normal Hull arrived at the marina, FDR was greeted by reporters and Miami's mayor, Redmond Gautier, who escorted him to Bayfront Park in a green Buick convertible. The car pulled up to an elevated spot near the park's bandstand area at about 9 p.m. Roosevelt pulled himself up the seat until he was sitting on the folded canvas top, grabbed a microphone, and delivered 143 words of pleasantries to the assembled crowd for a couple of minutes.
Mr. Mayor, my friends of Miami, I am not a stranger here because for a good many years I used to come down here. I haven't been here for 7 years, but on my coming back I have firmly resolved not to make it the last time.
He then slid back down to his seat. Roosevelt spotted his friend, Chicago Mayor Tony Cermak, in the record crowd of 25,000 people and waved him over to the car. The two spoke briefly before the police motorcycle escorts and his chauffeur started their engines to continue their way to the train station. Also in the crowd was 32-year-old unemployed bricklayer Guiseppe Zangara. Zangara was born in Calabria, Italy, emigrated to the U.S. in 1923, and became a naturalized citizen in 1929. After his naturalization, Zangara joined the Bricklayers Union and the Republican Party. Oh, and before anyone knew Roosevelt would be in Miami, Zangara bought a .32 caliber revolver for $8 at a local pawn shop. He brought the pistol and a pocket full of bullets with him to Bayfront Park. At 5 foot 1 inches tall, Zangara could not see Roosevelt despite being only 25 feet away, but he did notice that another spectator, 5 foot 4 inch Lillian Cross, had found a place to stand on a bench in order to see the president-elect. After Roosevelt finished his speech at 9:35 p.m., Zangara pulled out his pistol, shouted, "Too many people are starving," and fired toward the back of FDR's head. Screams and pandemonium followed. Witnesses claimed they saw bystander Thomas Armour wrestling with Zangara for control of the gun. Lillian Cross gave interviews that after the first shot, which left gunpowder burns on her cheek, she grabbed the gunman's arm and tried to lift it upwards until others, including Armour, arrived to help. As Zangara's arm was raised, he continued firing as he tried to force his arm back down while also bending his wrist downward. Zangara did not stop firing until the pistol's 5-round cylinder was empty. When the shooting started, Secret Service agents rushed to form a protective bubble around Roosevelt's car. One of the agents ran straight towards Zangara. 2 Miami police officers threw themselves across chairs to bring down the assassin, while a third dove to retrieve the pistol. In total, 5 people were shot, including Chicago Mayor Cermak, who had been shot in the chest. But Roosevelt, who thought he heard firecrackers instead of gunshots, was uninjured. Once the crowd learned of the 5 injuries, they were ready to lynch Zangara. Only Roosevelt's pleas to the crowd to leave justice to the authorities spared Zangara from being beaten to death. Secret Service agents yelled at Roosevelt's chauffeur to take his car out of the park, which he started to do, until Roosevelt made him stop to place the injured Cermak in the back seat with him. As Roosevelt raced Cermak to Jackson Memorial Hospital, he cradled Cermak's head on his shoulder and told him, "Tony, don't move, keep quiet, it won't hurt." Doctors later said Roosevelt's actions likely kept Cermak from going into shock. Roosevelt remained at the hospital for the next 4 hours to support Cermak and visit with the other shooting victims. Meanwhile, the police hustled Zangara from the park to arrest him, but also to save him from being lynched. Once Zangara arrived at the jail in the Dade County Courthouse, Sheriff Dan Hardy, who spoke some Italian, questioned the prisoner. Zangara made one explanation and stuck to it. He meant to kill the president-elect because he hated all rulers and hoped to get relief from his stomach pains by killing Roosevelt. As Zangara put it, "I have the gun in my hand. I will kill kings and presidents first, and next, all capitalists." He continued, "I don't hate Mr. Roosevelt personally. I hate all officials and anyone who is rich." But what is this about stomach pains? Zangara told the FBI that chronic stomach pain led to his actions. "Since my stomach hurt, I want to make even with the capitalists by kill the president. My stomach hurt long time." And it had been a long time. The pain started when he was 6 years old. Doctors repeatedly told him the pain was chronic and incurable. And Zangara blamed the kings, presidents, and capitalists for the stomach pain he endured. The next day, Thursday, February 16th, Zangara was arraigned before Judge E.C. Collins on 4 counts of premeditated attempted murder. Charges for shooting Cermak were pending until Cermak's condition stabilized. The county physician examined Zangara and attributed his pains to a nervous gastritis induced by fright, but he declared the prisoner sane. The chief of Zangara's court-appointed counsel also declared him to be a sane man. The formal trial began the next Monday, February 20th. Judge Collins denied each motion that Zangara's lawyers raised. Zangara was then brought before the judge and pleaded guilty to all 4 charges. Judge Collins sentenced Zangara to 4 20-year terms to run consecutively. As he was led out of the courtroom, Zangara told the judge, 4 times 20 is 80. Oh, Judge, don't be stingy. Give me 100 years. On Monday, March 6th, 19 days after he was shot, Mayor Cermak died. Cermak's wound was high on the right side of his chest, traveling at a downward angle until it lodged in front of the 11th vertebra. The position of the bullet made it too difficult to surgically remove. Cermak's autopsy revealed that the bullet wound had healed, but he had died from complications of colitis, which may have been related to the bullet or the medical care he received. Cermak was given a hero's funeral, and his alleged words to Roosevelt, "I'm glad it was me instead of you," are inscribed on a plaque at Bayfront Park. Cermak had died at 6:57 a.m. The autopsy was held at 8:30 a.m. The report was sent to the coroner at 1 p.m., where a jury confirmed the report in 18 minutes. The coroner's report was then sent to the grand jury, which indicted Zangara for Cermak's murder. The report and the first-degree murder indictment were in the office of the court clerk by 5 p.m., the same day Cermak died. Zangara pled guilty, but the judge, Circuit Court Judge Uli O. Thompson, could not sentence him to death based solely on a guilty plea. Judge Thompson ordered a sentencing hearing before a 12-person jury for Thursday, March 9th, where witnesses were presented, evidence was introduced, lawyers argued, and the jury deliberated. At the end of the brief trial, Judge Thompson sentenced Zangara to death by electric chair, but he did so in such a formal and legal way that Zangara didn't quite understand. Zangara asked the judge, "You give me electric chair?" "Yes," the judge replied. Then Zangara became defiant, yelling back at the judge, "Well, I no scared of electric chair because I was thinking I was right to kill the president. It is capitalists for the crooked government, and you is a crook man, because the crook man put me in the electric chair. You are a crook man. A smiling Zangara was led out of the courtroom and moved to Rayford State Prison. Zangara refused to appeal the sentence. Under Florida law, a convicted murderer could not share a cell space with another prisoner before his execution, so they allocated a special death cell. However, another convicted murderer was already in the death cell awaiting execution at Rayford. Zangara's sentence required prison officials to expand their waiting area for prisoners sentenced to death, and the death cell became death row, which was the first time the term had been used. On the morning of March 20th, 1933, after 10 days on death row and 33 days after he tried to kill President-elect Roosevelt, Zangara was executed. As he entered the execution chamber, he shook himself free from his guards, crying, "No, don't touch me. I go myself. I no scared of electric chair. I show you." He then walked swiftly to the chair and sat down in it. As he stared at the assembled crowd of about 30 spectators, Zangara asked, "No movies, hey? Where the camera to take my picture?" No one answered. Zangara, disappointed that his 15 minutes of fame were cut short, complained, "No chance for nobody to come here to take my picture. Lousy capitalists, no pictures, capitalists, lousy bunch, crooks." Zangara's final statement was, "Viva l'Italia, goodbye to all poor peoples everywhere. Pushed a button. Go ahead, pushed a button." It wasn't actually a button, but a handle, and Dade County Sheriff Dan Hardy turned that handle to conclude one of the swiftest trials and executions in the 20th century. At his autopsy, doctors attributed the stomach pain Zangara had suffered for all his life to adhesions or fibrous bands similar to scar tissue that they found on his diseased gallbladder. On March 4th, 1933, 17 days after the assassination attempt and 2 days before Cermak died, Roosevelt was sworn in and delivered his inaugural address, which, among other things, reminded Americans
that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
On that February night in Miami, the nation learned a lot about how FDR could lead a troubled nation out of the Great Depression through his own reaction to a fearful, life-threatening experience. The press watched and reported on every move FDR made to see if he was frightened, nervous, relieved, rattled, or petulant. He was none of those things. He appeared unfazed, calm, deliberate, and optimistic. According to the press, he said and did the right things at the right time. He stopped the car to pick up the wounded. He assured the crowd he was all right. He calmly talked Cermak out of shock, and he visited the victims that night and returned to the hospital the next day with flowers, cards, and baskets of fruit. All these actions showed a concern and compassion for others, which is something the nation desperately needed at that time, and reinforced Roosevelt's public image as a strong leader. Thanks for watching.